The offer came in at $20,000 below asking. My realtor called me on a Tuesday morning to walk me through it. She told me the market had softened in the 2 weeks since we had listed the house, that this was the only serious offer we had received, and that she thought we should consider accepting it. I asked her how many showings we had done. She said 11. I asked her how many of those showings had resulted in second visits. She said 2. I asked her whether either of those second visits had led to anything. She paused. She told me that one of them had been the buyer who had now made the offer. The other had been a couple who had decided to keep looking. I asked her what she would recommend. She told me she thought we should counter at $5,000 below asking and try to meet in the middle. She told me that if the buyer walked, we might be looking at another 6 to 8 weeks on the market with no guarantee of a better offer. I told her I needed to think about it overnight. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen looking at the listing materials she had sent me when we had started the process. Something was bothering me. I could not put my finger on what it was. The house was in a desirable neighborhood. It had been updated recently. It was priced in line with comparable properties. 11 showings in 2 weeks was not a lot, but it was not nothing. And yet, the only offer that had come in was significantly under asking from a buyer who had been the very first person to walk through. I opened my laptop and started searching for the listing online. I wanted to see it the way a buyer would see it. What I found made my stomach drop. The house had been my parents' house. They had owned it for almost 40 years, raised 3 children in it, and decided to sell it after my father had retired, and they had bought a smaller place closer to my sister. They had asked me, as the oldest, to handle the sale on their behalf. They had given me power of attorney to sign documents. They had trusted me to find a good realtor and to manage the process while they got settled in their new home. I had hired a realtor named Karen. She had come recommended by a friend who had used her for a transaction 2 years earlier. Karen had been professional in our first meeting. She had walked through the house, taken detailed notes, and given us a recommended listing price that was consistent with what my own research had suggested. She had explained her process, her marketing approach, and her fee structure clearly. I had felt good about the choice. She had also mentioned, in passing, that she had a few buyers in her own client base who had been looking for a house in our neighborhood. She had said she would make sure they knew about the listing as soon as it went live. I had thought at the time that this was a good sign. A realtor with existing buyer interest meant a faster sale. The listing had gone live on a Friday. The first showing had been on Saturday. The buyer who had just made the under-asking offer had been at that first showing. He had been one of Karen's clients. When I started looking at the listing online that Tuesday night, I noticed a few things that did not match what Karen had told me about the marketing. The photos on the public listing were not the photos she had shown me in our initial meeting. The photos she had shown me had been bright, professionally staged, and flattering. The photos that were actually live on the major real estate sites were dim, awkwardly framed, and made the house look smaller than it was. The main kitchen photo had been taken with the lights off. The living room photo cut off the windows that were one of the house's best features. The listing description was also different from what she had shown me. The version on the public sites was short, generic, and missing the key details about the recent updates we had made. The version she had emailed me as a draft had been 2 paragraphs longer and had described the house in detail. The pricing was correct. The basic information was correct. But the presentation was being deliberately underpowered. The house was being shown to the market in a way that would generate less interest than it should have. And the buyer who had been positioned to make the only serious offer was Karen's own client. I called my sister that night. She had worked in real estate in a different city for about 5 years before changing careers. I told her what I had found and asked her what she thought. She listened to everything and then asked me one question. She asked me whether Karen had disclosed that the buyer was her own client and whether the disclosure paperwork had included the specific terms of dual agency. I told her I did not know. I had signed a lot of papers when we had listed the house, and I had not read all of them as carefully as I probably should have. She told me to look at every document Karen had given me and to find anything that referenced dual agency, designated agency, or any other arrangement where Karen would be representing both the seller and the buyer in the same transaction. She told me that in our state, this kind of arrangement was legal, but required specific written disclosure and informed consent from both parties. I went through the file that night. I found one document 3 pages long that included language about dual agency. My signature was on it. The date was the day we had listed the house. The document had been included in a stack of about 15 pages of standard listing paperwork. I had signed it without understanding what it said. The next morning, I called a different realtor, someone my sister knew who worked in the same market, for an outside opinion. I sent her the public listing and a summary of the showings and the offer. I did not tell her who the listing agent was. She got back to me within an hour. She told me the listing was being marketed badly. The photos were below industry standard for a property in that price range. The description was missing information that any buyer's agent would want to know. The lack of showings was not a market problem. It was a presentation problem. She told me that, in her opinion, a well-marketed version of the same listing should have generated 2 to 3 times the showing activity in the first 2 weeks, and that an offer $20,000 below asking was not consistent with what the house should be commanding. I asked her one more question. I asked her whether it was unusual for a listing agent to also represent the buyer in the same transaction. She told me it was not unusual, but that it created significant conflicts of interest and that in most cases, the seller was disadvantaged by the arrangement because the agent had a financial incentive to close the deal quickly rather than to maximize the seller's price. I had been disadvantaged on purpose. Karen had structured the entire transaction to favor her own client, who happened to be her own buyer, and the undermarketing of the listing had been part of the plan. I didn't call Karen the next morning. I called her broker. Brokers are responsible for the conduct of the agents who work under their license. I told the broker, in a calm and detailed conversation, exactly what I'd found. The marketing discrepancies, the dual agency arrangement, the under-asking offer from Karen's own client, the opinion of an outside agent that the listing was being deliberately underpowered. The broker asked me to send him everything. The original photos Karen had shown me, the drafts she had sent me, the public listing as it currently appeared, the offer document, the dual agency disclosure. I sent it all that afternoon. The broker called me back the next day. He told me, without admitting any wrongdoing on Karen's part, that the situation raised concerns that his brokerage took seriously. He told me he was going to do 2 things. First, he was going to take over the listing personally for the remainder of the contract period, at no additional cost to me. Second, he was going to relist the property with new photos, a new description, and a full remarketing push. He also told me that the offer from Karen's client would be withdrawn. He did not explain why. I did not ask. The house went back on the market the following Monday, with the broker as the new listing agent. The photos were professional. The description was complete. Within 5 days, there had been 27 showings. Within 10 days, we had 4 offers. The highest one was $18,000, above the original asking price. We accepted it. The transaction closed about 6 weeks later. My parents got significantly more money for the house than they would have gotten if I had taken Karen's recommendation on that Tuesday morning. Karen was no longer with the brokerage by the time the sale closed. I do not know whether she was let go or whether she had left on her own. I never spoke to her again. I filed a complaint with the State Real Estate Commission. The investigation took about 8 months. The outcome, which I learned through a brief letter, was that Karen had been disciplined and had been required to complete additional training before she could continue practicing. The specifics were not made public. I am sometimes asked by friends who are about to sell a house what they should look for in a realtor. I tell them the same thing every time. Read every document before you sign it, understand what dual agency is, and decide in advance whether you are willing to accept it. Check the listing the day it goes live and compare what the public sees to what your agent has shown you. And if anything feels off, even slightly off, Get a second opinion before you accept any offer. The person representing you is supposed to be on your side. Sometimes they are not. The only way to know the difference is to verify it yourself. If this story hit you, subscribe. Every case on this channel starts with trust and ends with the truth.